Speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs with stories and messages to support your well-being, let alone your most evocative dreams.
Hey, it's another groovy day, and you know why that is? Because it's Life Mastery Radio Day. And when I got up this morning, I decided that it was already going to be a groovy day. So now the rest of the day is groovy, and if something changes, I just think about when I got up, and I go right back to it. Da, 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 da. And I really like that. It's like, I get to hang out with some really cool people every week, especially my good friend Jackie. And then we always get to hang out with some even cooler people. Right, Jackie? They're even cooler than us sometimes.
They are most of the time, all of the time.
As always, I like to open up the show with a little centering exercise. So if we get quiet for a second, and I want you to just relax for a minute. Think about the universe, God, Allah, the dude, the tree outside your window, whatever it is that you connect to. Think about that just for a minute. And let's take in a deep breath, nice and slow. Thinking about all those groovy things. And let that breath out with a big ah. And just allow your essence to flow up through your heart center and right out of your speaker box. Let's do that one more time. And this time, I want you to think about those dreams, visions, and goals. Maybe that book you're going to write. We're coming close to the end of the year, so don't worry if you haven't accomplished it yet. But just today's a brand new baby day that you can get started. So think about those things. In with a breath real slow. And again, just let it out with a big ah. And just let it flow up out into the universe. And for sure, allow the universe, God, Allah, the dude, the opportunity to make those come true for you. There you go. As always, I have my co-host with me today. Look at that big smile. I got her to smile today, and she's waving. Yay.
What do you mean? You give me a smile every week.
I know, but I gotta make it a point that, see, then people look at you, right? They're not looking at me. Hi, Jackie. How are you today, my friend? How's things going? Things are getting, kids are back to school. Parents are trying to figure it out. Sounds a little nutso to me.
I am hearing from a lot of parents who don't know what's going to happen from day to day. The schools are trying, I'm sure, the best they can to figure out this whole virtual situation, how to teach necessary curriculum, how to keep the kids engaged. I'm sure it is very challenging for them. However, it also appears that they're not really giving a set schedule each week.
Yeah.
Probably 80% of the parents I've talked to have said, yeah, the school emails us on Sunday night and tells us what the plan is for our child that week, what the class schedule's like, how long they're going to be in each class. And, you know, that can only make it harder for parents who have to still run their own businesses or whatever and have meetings with their own clients, and how do they schedule things without knowing what their kids are doing. So it's a real big challenge right now, and I don't know what kind of normal this is going to be for any length of time.
Well, hopefully, but yeah, soon that we'll be able to get the kids back into school. I think that is so important. I you know, a lot of these things that are being brought to our attention, we had no idea. We took it for granted. Everything about this whole, what do we want to say, event has really brought some things to our attention. And I think there are some really good things that have come out of it. I think a lot of employers have figured out they don't need to spend millions of dollars on office space. I think that's really cool. Yeah. And education, I think, is going to change it's just figuring these things out, figuring out the little idiosyncrasies and how to get it to work and da-da-da-da-da.
Well, and businesses have had to adapt a lot too with benefits for their employees, knowing that they have children that aren't in school. So employers have definitely had to create these opportunities for parents to stay at home and to rework their schedules to accommodate their kids being
Yeah.
home. So there's
Can you imagine?
whole different, dynamics all the way around that have changed things. Probably for
what's
good.
one good thing though I was thinking about the other day? It's making the family unit more of a family unit, right?
Yep.
I think that
Absolutely.
is the biggest thing that I think over time we've moved away from that, and now parents are involved in with their kids. I mean, how could they not be, right? It's just everybody's
Well, in
involved.
fact, I've heard many of my students give speeches about COVID and how it changed their life. And in every instance, my heart is always warmed when the child will talk about how they've had more family time and they've had more fun with their family. And so there's always something in that regard that's the positive for them through all the negative, is that they've gotten to know their family better. And so that's really cool.
That's a huge bonus. I think that's going to have great effects, especially for the future. And maybe it'll turn things around with our youth. And I think we're ready for a show, though. My brain hurts now. I
think we have a perfect show scheduled today, right?
We do. I want to remind the listeners that today's show page is at www.lifemasteryradio.net. There you will find everything that we talk about on the show today. And if you look over to the right, you'll see a sign up for a newsletter. And every week, Jackie produces a newsletter that talks about who's been on the show, who's coming on the show, and a blog post about who was on the show and what we talked about. So it's pretty cool. And that's all we use that email address for, is that newsletter. It's a great way to stay up to date with what's going on in Todd and Jackie's world, and on Life Mastery,
which is a pretty exciting world.
We have fun every week. We get to hang out and talk to some really cool people. While you're there, you can check out my book. It's right there, the link to Amazon, 6 Keys to Life Mastery, Unlocking Life Skills for Successful Living. I know you'll just love it. After you read it and love it, go to Amazon and tell me what you think about it. That way I get to know what the next book's going to come out, how I should organize that and work it. Boy, that book's, I saw our guest ebook today and I was like, at one time I had a book named Awaken the Wonderful Wizard Within.
Really?
It's still there. And I just got that idea cooking again today after I saw our guest book.
Was it about your wizardry technical skills?
No, it's more about living a life of being connected and awakened, and I don't want to say woke because that's a little different. That's a different technology.
Right.
Just aware, and some of the things, life skills. I think that some of those things are in 6 Keys to Life Mastery, but yeah,
I'm sure they are.
More from
there.
I gotta say, I don't know if you watch Netflix, no, Amazon Prime. There's a really cool show that I found. It's 5 seasons and it's called The Adventures of Merlin.
Oh, I bet you love that.
It is an amazing, and I'm almost done with the 5 seasons. I'm like,
Is it set in today's time period or?
No, it's back. Yeah, back in the days of chivalry and knighthood, and of course Merlin guarding King Arthur, and oh man.
Yeah, cool.
I can't tell you enough how cool a show that is. So check it out.
Yeah.
There's a plug. I hope they realize I'm plugging their.
Maybe they'll give you a role of some sort.
Our guest has been sitting patiently while we just jabbered on. Look at that big smile she has. Our guest today is Judi Miller. And Judi was a highly successful certified public accountant and corporate finance executive who, unknown to her co-workers, lived in terror of the night and the possibility of sexual assault. Happily married with children, her fears made life a modern-day nightmare. But worse, she had no idea why. There was nothing in her own personal background that would warrant this near constant state of fear. Pretty amazing. In her new book, Perfect, A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation, she relates the extraordinary path she took to discover the root of those fears. It's an amazing journey that Judi has was guided to take that, brought the exact right people together in the exact right order to right a wrong committed decades ago before her birth, which left its shadow on her soul. It's amazing that she discovered that. Today, you'll hear from her about her spiritual journey that unfolded, which opened her heart, enabled forgiveness across multiple generations, and showed her the perfection of all that we are. Hey, Judi, welcome to the show. Did I build you up big enough? Or are you like...
It's great to be here. I know that I'm going to have fun with the both of you.
So this book, did you know you had a book in you?
I believe everybody has a book in them.
That's good.
I just didn't know what the story was going to be.
Right. And
Right.
that's the basis of your book. It's about story, and those stories that we're hanging on to that we probably shouldn't hang on to, or those stories that are hanging on to us that we need to clear out. Tell us a little bit about how you came to that understanding.
Sure. So I'm going to start by asking you guys 3 questions. You could answer aloud, or you don't have to answer at all.
She turned it around on us, Jackie.
So have you ever felt different, like you didn't belong?
Totally.
Absolutely.
Have you ever felt incomplete, maybe always searching for someone or something to make you feel whole?
At a time, yeah.
Okay. Or maybe, like me, maybe you felt unworthy, always having to prove yourself over and over again.
Yes, on all 3 counts.
So the reason I asked the both of you,
I didn't feel like I had to prove myself. I just had to prove myself. It wasn't it just,
Yeah.
anyway.
but the reason I asked you two these questions and your listeners these questions is because these feelings literally plagued me for most of my life.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I started my career as a CPA and worked in the healthcare industry for over 25 years. But on this journey that I describe in Perfect, I show you how I let go of those stories and those feelings that no longer served me, and how I experienced true and ultimate freedom and happiness. So as you mentioned, the subtitle to my book is called A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. But there's so many different definitions of forgiveness. But for me, forgiveness is really, really simple. It means to forgo or to let go of. So painful and unwanted events are going to happen to all of us. We could either literally experience that event once, or we could play it over and over again until it literally becomes stuck in our bodies. It becomes our identity. So forgiveness for me is to just let go of those stories that no longer serve us, so we can move forward and experience ultimate freedom and happiness. So for me, forgiveness really is a gift. It's really an act of self-love. So if you'd allow me, I'd like to give you a 5-minute overview of my story specifically, and then we can go into specific details wherever you like. Okay?
Take 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Well, let me
However
just
long it takes.
let me ask you one thing really quickly, and I read it in your book, and that is, and maybe you'll talk about this, but these stories we hang on to, right? And we don't realize we're hanging on to them, yet we continually play them in our head thinking they're a part of us. And I think in your book, you talked about the sharing that story with somebody else sparks the ability to get it out.
Right, so I'll definitely talk about that. So for me, just to answer your question, observation creates the awareness that unlocks the understanding. So by sharing it with someone or even observing your own thoughts, you can start to let them go. And I can show you as I go through the story. So like many children, I had fears as a child. I was actually afraid of drowning. I was terrified of the night. And I was also terrified of sexual assault. I had never been assaulted. So as a child, these feelings were really confusing. I actually never shared it with anyone until this book came out. So as a child, I could sense and feel different spirits and different energies at night, especially at night. And I didn't know if those energies were there to hurt me. So literally night after night, I would crawl into bed, pull the covers over my head, and I would recite the Lord's Prayer over and over again until exhausted, I would fall asleep. And as a child, this was my ritual every night. And it continued well into my 20s. As I mentioned, I started my career as a CPA. So there I was going to work during the day, and then at night crawling back into bed, terrified of what I couldn't explain. And I actually met my husband at work. My husband is a CPA also. We got married and we had 2 kids. And in the exhaustion of raising two incredible children, commuting 3 hours a day to work and working 40 to 50 hours a week, everything stopped. In the exhaustion, the terror stopped. The subtle whispers, the spirits, the energies all stopped. Then my kids grew up and they went off to college. And maybe many of you could associate with this. The house became silent. Mm-hmm. And in that silence, everything returned. The spirits, the energies, the terror. I literally, it must have looked comical to my neighbors because I literally tiptoed around my house, afraid of what I might encounter or see. It felt like somebody was standing behind me. It felt like eyes were staring at me from across the room. I would actually wake up in the middle of the night, terrified, clutching at my husband in fear, and soon we both began to lose sleep. So around the same time, I started to bleed uncontrollably month after month, and my doctor recommended that I have a hysterectomy. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I worked in the healthcare industry for over 25 years, and modern medicine was something that I trusted implicitly. But I was terrified of the surgery, and it felt like the same terror that I had as a child and the same terror that returned to me as an adult. So a friend of mine recommended that I read a book called Light Emerging by Barbara Brennan. And Barbara was a former NASA physicist, and she studied the human energy field. And what she learned, she was actually able to heal people with her hands. So here I was, days before my surgery was scheduled, Googling healers near me. And as I sat across
there must be another way. There's got to be another way.
There's got to be another way, but I did go through with the surgery. So as I sat across from my healer for that very first time, I literally heard the click of a lock, like my entire life was locking into place. And at the time, I didn't know the role that healer would actually play in my family's history and my lineage. So my healer helped me heal after my surgery. And then we started to explore this uncontrollable fear of the dark. I never mentioned to her my fear of sexual assault. So we started to look at my childhood experiences. Was there anything from my childhood that had triggered it? But nothing came to light. And then she introduced me to past lives. Past lives was something that I'd never even heard of. She introduced me to the amazing work of Dr. Brian Weiss. Dr. Weiss was a prominent psychiatrist. He actually studied at Columbia and Yale, and he was highly respected. So I knew I had to go to his seminar. There was probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of people at his seminar. But Todd and Jackie, can you guess what happened? I fell asleep. I slept through the entire thing. So he said literally 50% of the group would actually have this experience, this past life experience, but I didn't. I wasn't one of those 50. I just slept through it. But that's a different point. So then with my healer, we also started to talk about things that we inherit from our parents. And we know that through our DNA, we could inherit the color of our eyes, the color of our hair, other physical characteristics. But we also started to talk about the science of epigenetics. And the science of epigenetics says that we could actually inherit the pain and the terror from our parents.
Memories. The memories of what happened. Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, they've actually shown where Holocaust victims, their children and their grandchildren actually have the same pain and terror and memories in their bodies. There's been recent studies that actually have shown with mice, they introduced the smell of cherry blossoms to the mice and then zapped the mice gently on the feet. But what's interesting is that the mice's children and their children were triggered by the scent of the cherry blossom, even though they'd never been zapped, they'd never been exposed to the parent that had been zapped. So what we learned is that the pain and the terror that I felt at night wasn't actually my own. It was actually a cellular memory from my mother. But my story doesn't end there. There's actually a shocking past life connection to the very healer in this lifetime that I trusted to heal me. In a previous lifetime, she was the one that inflicted the pain and the terror on my family. And this was the universe's opportunity to allow everyone to heal. So in that moment of revelation, I could have felt fear, terror, maybe even betrayal, but I didn't. All I felt was the immense perfection. That's where the name of the book came from. Perfection and beauty of the universe. I saw how all of our souls and our lives are interconnected and how we are unconditionally loved. And it was truly a miraculous experience. So yeah, that's why I came up with the name Perfect.
There was a song involved too, wasn't there?
Yes, actually, as I was going through this experience, Ed Sheeran's song Perfect came on the radio. And I totally believe in coincidences. I believe coincidences is the universe's way of saying, we're here. We've got your back. You're not alone. You're always loved.
You know, that's funny that you say that, because in my early days of awakening and coming to know who I was, there was a lot of disbelief about a higher power and how that could help me and make my life better. And I was in a 12-step program, of course, where I was really trying to get myself sorted out and really trust in that higher power. And I can remember my higher power would talk to me through the radio, through the songs that would play. Like I'd be contemplating something or working out with something, and I'd just go get in my truck and start the truck up, and this song would come on, and there would be the message that I was supposed to hear. So music has a way of moving us in more ways than we can even imagine.
How perfect is that?
Yeah, totally. So I really I just want to talk a minute about how you laid this. You have a copy of the book, so you might want to hold that book up.
Sure. So
there
perfect.
it is. It's a really cool cover. So much purple. Do you like purple?
It just resonated with me at the time. I kind of like the purple and the pinks. So you
Yeah.
can probably
Well, I was
tell.
noticing that we have this kind of, but I really like the way you laid this book out. You told us your story, and then you had an integration exercise where you recapped some of the lessons learned, and then you went through exercises. Did you come up with this on your own? Did this just work out in the way of the book, or how did you come up with that? It's really a cool way to do it.
So it was actually written as a memoir, but I wanted people to read and learn from it. So as you're correct, it's actually broken up into kind of 3 different sections. And I had heard that most people only read the first 19 pages of a book.
Right.
So the way that Perfect is written, about 80 to 90% of it is written like a novel. So you want to pick it up and you want to know how it actually ends. So 80 to 90% is written that way. And Todd, as you mentioned, there are a couple of reflections because I wanted people to go through the experience, but also learn what are some of the lessons and how they could apply it in their own lives. And then there's a handful of simple exercises so they can embody
simple things
very
that you
simple.
can do, right? And
Exactly.
it blew me away when I was reading those. It's like, wow, this is really cool.
And I made them simple on purpose because I know I've been there, how busy we all are. We don't need more things to do, but I included the exercises so people could embody the experiences and the lessons for themselves.
That's cool. Now, how did you discover that this fear you were experiencing was from your mother? How did that go down while you were working with your healer?
So I definitely go into detail in the book, but I just want to share another fact with you. Not most, female babies are born with about 2 to 3 million of their reproductive eggs at birth. And there's some debate on whether or not you actually produce more. Some people believe that's all the reproductive eggs you will ever have. Mm-hmm. So during your mother's childhood, you were in there somewhere as an unborn egg. So you actually went through most of your mother's experiences. So some of the trauma and the pain that your mother went through on a cellular level, you were actually there.
Mm-hmm.
So with working with healers, I had 2 healers actually. With working with the healers, we were able to uncover this past and where that terror came from. Actually, it goes into detail. I never knew. I don't share this a lot. You guys are very special. I don't really normally share this. It's in the book though. My mother was attacked when she was 12 years old by her stepfather. And I actually didn't know this. No one knew this until her 80th birthday, right around the time that I was having this hysterectomy. And we were talking about the universe and coincidences. This is when I found out that my mother actually went through that trauma. That's when we learned that that's where that fear and that trauma in my body was coming from.
Did that hit you just like that, or did it take a while for you to process that?
It actually probably less than a week. Less than a week. And
wow, so a lifetime of fear was finally explained in 1 week period.
Exactly. You know, we were talking about Dr. Brian Weiss, who I was introduced to, and the way he came to learn about past lives is that he had a patient. He was a psychiatrist. He had a patient named Catherine who had these unexplainable fears. And during a past life regression, he was able to unblock where those fears were coming from. And that awareness helped her release those stories and those fears. And she was actually healed. So it's amazing how it works.
Wow. And so was your mother also living with these same fears her whole life? Or had she been able to heal from that at some point?
So I believe the journey that I went on actually healed, but not just my mother. So they say certain Native American cultures believe that when you heal, your traumas and your triumphs go back 7 generations and 7 generations forward. So I definitely believe my mother was healed, and I also believe that my children were also healed as well. So in the book, one of the things that I talk about, and you can make your own judgment, one of the things that I talked about is my mother was told never to speak of this, and she had problems expressing herself. I inherited that from her. My entire life, I could never use my voice.
Yep.
And through this healing, now here I am sharing the story with the world. So yes, I do believe that very powerful healing happens.
I'm curious,
So
Judi.
cool.
I'm curious. So when I wrote this book, and it's my stories, it's filled with my stories about my trials and tribulations, and there are stories about my kids in there, and there are stories about things my kids didn't know. And I got a little pushback. Oh, Dad, you can't put that in there. You can't do that. Did you get some pushback too, or?
The original version of the book, my daughter said, "Do not put me in that book."
I was just curious, because that must be a regular thing. It must
No,
be.
but she actually read it after it was published, and she said she actually cried, and she said she was really touched. So I don't think it's just my story. I believe, like you mentioned, the way the book is organized, there's so many lessons for so many people. So I think there's 2 aspects. There's some very practical applications that people could implement in their lives. There's also certain amazing things that happened on my journey that I think are so relevant for our time now.
Yeah.
So you were talking about stories, about letting go of our stories. And stories aren't necessarily bad, right?
Right.
So Todd, you've got an amazing voice. You're changing the world. Jackie, you're beautiful and courageous and loving. Those are empowering stories. Those are great. But we also have disempowering stories that keep us prisoners in our own lives. And just to share some information with you, we have 60,000 thoughts a day. 95% of them are the same ones we had yesterday and the day before. And 80% of them are negative. So for most people, can you guess what kind of stories they're creating in their lives?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So very negative ones. And, we are social beings. We need loving and supportive relationships. So people ask me, so when something happens, a negative event happens, does that mean I can't share it with anyone? That's not what I'm saying. So Angeles Arian is a cultural anthropologist, and she says that in certain Native American cultures, it's important to share your story with loving and
it's all
supportive
about
people. Right. But no more than 3 times. If you share your story more than 3 times, Jackie, I'm looking at Jackie. I'm just joking, or Todd. They will take you and literally hang you over a cliff until you're willing to let go of your story and see the wisdom in the experience.
That's interesting because telling a story over and over actually helps the person to heal, because I've witnessed it. But then it also inspires others to maybe make different choices. So it's interesting that would come up, that after they talked about it 3 times, because a really good speaker pulls their stories out of their hat and replays it for the audience to benefit them.
And I think that's a very valid point, but I think there's different aspects. I think stories are very powerful to convey a message because people love stories, right? So I fully agree with you, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote Perfect the way that I wrote it. But it's also very disempowering if you have a negative story that you keep playing over and over again.
You hold on to it, right?
Yeah, that you hold on to it.
So Jackie, what's coming up for you? Because it's amazing. I know part of Jackie's story, and she's let a lot of people know about it. And Judi, she lived your story in real life, pretty much.
I lived your mother's story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, when you said about your mother not having a voice and you not having a voice, that is exactly why I do what I do, because when you are told not to tell, then you begin to become repressed about talking to anybody about anything, because I know I was afraid I might tell something I wasn't supposed to tell. And so I just kept quiet. I never initiated conversations or anything like that. So I completely understand what that meant for your mother. And I find it very interesting that it passed to you as well. And the way that you explain the epigenetics is pretty fascinating. But I think there's a phrase that you use in your book, which is take it to the body. What does that mean?
Oh, perfect, perfect. So after an event happens, right? Emotions are meant to be felt and processed in the body. Most of us, a lot of us, myself included for most of my life, I was afraid to feel my emotions. I would either stuff them away, I would deny them, I wouldn't acknowledge them, or I would think about them. So emotions are truly meant to be felt in the body, not created as a story in our head. So Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor wrote the book called My Stroke of Insight. She was a Harvard neuroscientist who was able to cure herself from traumatic brain injury. And the information that I took from her book is that it takes us 90 seconds after an event happens, either good or bad. It takes 90 seconds for us to actually process that event through our body and our physiology and to let it go. After that 90 seconds, it's up to us. We could either let go of that, or we can create a story that either empowers us or disempowers us. So that's what I learned on my journey. A lot of the times I just process my emotions and let them go. But like everyone, sometimes they get stuck. So what I recommend is that you actually take it to the body. So I mentioned that for most of my life, I felt different. I didn't belong. And people would say hurtful things, and it literally felt like an elephant that sat on my chest and I couldn't breathe. So I'd love both of you to just think of something, an event. Maybe somebody said something to you. Where do you actually feel that in your body? Do you feel it as a heaviness in your chest like I did? Or maybe you feel that contracted energy in your solar plexus, or maybe your throat tightening up. So take your hand and gently place it on that area. And if you can't, actually physically reach that area, maybe just imagine it, because it's just as powerful. And you invited me to close my eyes at the beginning of your call. So I'm inviting you to close your eyes. And if it's safe to do so, your listeners to close your eyes. So as you think back to that event, or maybe those hurtful words, and you feel it in your body and you have your hand gently on it, just take a deep breath in and let it all out. And as you do this, you might feel a stillness, a quietness that descends on you. And just breathe your loving presence in and out of that area a couple of times. And as you do this more and more, you begin to feel that contracted energy in your body begin to soften, maybe even dissolve. So this is something that, we're doing right now very quickly. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. You're training your body to truly feel emotions, because many of us don't feel our emotions. We think about it as a story in our head. So feel free to open your eyes. And the reason that's bad, so for example, right before we got on this call, I mentioned to both of you, I feel a fluttering in my chest. My stomach is starting to kind of rumble, and I feel a tightness in my throat. But those sensations I could label as nervousness, but those are the same exact sensations I feel when I'm excited.
Right.
It's me who decides whether or not I label that as either nervousness or excitement. And in the same way, that's how we go about our lives, labeling things.
Based on the stories in our heads and our experiences.
Right. So I believe that the emotions and sensations in our body is the truth. Thoughts, the stories, and the judgments in our head are not always so. So I'll give you a really simple exercise. So my next door neighbor, we made plans, she was going to come over, and this was before COVID-19. She didn't show up. So the first thing that I started thinking about was, what did I do wrong? She doesn't like me anymore. I mean, those are the thoughts that came to my head. So finally I picked up the phone and said, hey, where are you? And she said, well, I thought it was tomorrow. But see how quickly we can create a story around an event that maybe not even true?
Wow.
And no matter how much you practice and how much you're aware of this, as humans, this is just a part of how we process things, because it happens to me still today. You create these, and then I find I'll just have to step back and say, well, where is all this coming from? This is like, it's like if my coffee pot was broken, that would be a problem. But these problems that I'm creating in my mind, I can't even put in a paper sack to throw away.
Mm-hmm. Right. But we can disrupt our stories. We all have stories, but we can disrupt them. And some of them you might have heard some of the ways to disrupt them. Stories are like a record player, the grooves on a record player that keep playing over and over again. And we have to scratch that record so we can't play the same story. So,
what a great visual. Oh my gosh.
I don't know, depending on some of your listeners, I'm not sure if they're familiar with records.
Records? What are records?
Exactly. Okay, so on your CD, you need to scratch that CD so you can't play that song anymore. But there's different ways, and many of them you may have heard. So for example, when you start to have that negative thought, you could say cancel Claire, you could say cancel stop, you could replace it with a more empowering story. So that's one way. Another way is people have heard the rubber band. Where you put the rubber band on your wrist, and every time you have that negative thought, you sling it. And the reason I think that works is because it disrupts the story, but it also takes you back into your body where you're supposed to be processing those emotions.
I had a really cool one for a while, Judi.
What did you do?
I would actually hit Control-Alt-Delete in my mind twice and reboot.
I like
Remember that? Remember when we had to hit Control-Alt-Delete on computers to get them to reboot?
I still do that.
It worked for me, and I still will do it mentally every once in a while, but it was just because it reboots, it clears the buffers, and it was just a way of anchoring into that exact thought.
I love
well,
that.
And physical movement, doesn't physical movement break you out of that chain of thought as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So
doing
yesterday,
something physical.
I went to the dentist, and I've had a fear of dentists my entire life also as a child. And there she was, as she was working on me, the assistant was tapping me. She was trying to get me back into my body with some movement and some energy. But one of the ones that I learned from Tony Robbins, I had the honor of doing the firewalk experience with him twice, which was kind of cool. But one of the things that I learned from him, and I named it Zany Crazy Thing, is Tony was talking to this woman, and she was complaining about her husband. So Tony very lovingly picked up a glass of water and splashed it in her face. And the woman was like flabbergasted. And she knew that Tony was doing it from a loving space. Sure. So then she started talking again. 5 minutes later, she's starting to get negative about her husband again. And Tony picks up another glass of water and splashes it in her face. And she's now totally flabbergasted. But what did it do? It disrupted the pattern, but it also it created the awareness of the stories that she's creating. Because oftentimes we're not even aware of it. Right? So what my husband and I do when we get into an argument, and thank goodness he doesn't splash water in my face or we'd be arguing even longer, is we've agreed that we're going to grab each other by the nose. So when you're arguing and you're entrenched, he'll grab me by the nose, and I will be so flabbergasted, hysterically laughing, that I can't remember what I was even arguing about.
I heard that if you get into arguments like that, you just both take off all your clothes and stand in front of each other and see how long it lasts.
Well, if you're in public, that could be a
that's true. Well, we got to take this inside. Come on, let's go.
I used to give my kids marshmallows to throw at each other, and that always ended up being fun.
Oh, that would be good. That would be good and tasty. Oh, but yes. Something else that I learned from one of my mentors, Dr. Sue Morter is one of my mentors. And this was her grandmother. Whenever the kids got into an argument, she made them take the other person's side and argue that person.
I've heard that too.
So Todd and Jackie, if you got into an argument, Jackie, you would have to argue Todd's side.
Right. Just
gives you a different perspective.
It definitely gives you more empathy and understanding for sure. Yeah.
We should do that with politicians, right?
We should. Definitely.
Oh my gosh. Really interesting. That would be funny.
So Judi, how has this whole experience and how has that changed you from who the fear that you used to experience every day to, what do you experience now? How has it changed you? How is life different for you?
So, and I describe how I go through this process imperfect, but what I learned on this journey. So in the beginning, I mentioned that I felt different. And because I felt different, I felt like it was nothing. But in the nothingness, I realized that I could be anything that I want. So what do I mean by that? When we drop the stories, labels, and judgments, we see everything and everyone through the eyes of love. There is no separation. So by going through this experience, I feel a greater level of happiness, a greater level of joy, and a greater level of connectedness with everyone and everything.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Wow,
You know,
that is really cool.
there's a part in your book that really caught my eye, and so explain to us from your words and from your perspective how important posture is and motion.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And it's in the ebook too as well. So we are energy beings, and you may have heard this. Everything in life is energy, just vibrating at different frequencies. The table, the video, everything is just energies. Our thoughts are even energy. Science has even been able to measure our thoughts. So everything is energy. And what happens is, what I found is that when I felt stuck and stagnated in my life, guess what? I wasn't moving my energy. So it's so important to move. So you were talking about posture. And again, you know, this is something that I learned years and years ago. Our physiology. I'm going to quote Tony. Since I quoted Tony before, I'm going to quote Tony again.
Tony's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's groovy.
He is a groovy guy.
And I think he's originally from the West Coast, right?
Yeah.
But what he says is motion creates emotion, right? So how we hold our physiology dictates the emotions that we feel. So for example, like you were saying, posture, you know, when you stand up straight, look straight ahead, look up, you feel very confident and expansive. All energy is either expanding or contracting. When you look down, hunch, shuffle, walk, you're very contracted. So you start to feel very contracted. It's very, very hard to feel down and depressed when you're smiling.
And your chin's up.
Exactly.
And something else I like to tell people, your chin up and get that tail out from between your legs.
Yes,
Right?
I've heard you say that. I've heard you say that. It's great. So, like I said, Perfect has some very practical ways for helping people to let go of their stories, but there's also some very amazing experiences that I think would be so helpful for people now.
Well, you know, it's interesting to me, Judy, that you talk about our emotions and experiences right away as stories. It's not, so a story isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, a story for you isn't necessarily defined as something you write down or share verbally with someone else. It is what you create in yourself every day by the choices that you make. Am I on the right track or not?
Exactly, exactly. So what I recommend for people to do, and again, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. You've heard this before. You go to the gym and you don't expect to be transformed, right? So the first thing is truly to take it to your body and fully feel that emotion, acknowledge it, and then let it go. And when you start doing this, it becomes automatic and it becomes more easy. I believe our superpower is our power to choose and our power to decide. So between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And in that gap, we can choose to create a story or we can choose love. So I believe that there's two emotions. I believe all emotions fall into these two major buckets, fear and love. And for me, fear is just a contracted negative story. So you can come from, you get to decide. You get to decide if you come from a place of love or from a place of fear. And, you know, on my website, I write a monthly blog, and I was writing one day, and I realized that most of my life had been lived in fear. I was afraid of being different. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of being unworthy. I was afraid of being incomplete. And when you let go of all of that fear, those contracted energies, all that's left is love. So you do have a choice. And my mentor told me one day, you know, you decide. And I'm like, what do you mean you decide? And then I finally realized what she meant. In any moment, we decide how we experience life. We decide if we create a story or don't create a story. We decide if we create an empowering story or a disempowering story.
It was huge for me when I figured out I get to decide what I want to think about. That was, but the whole world just blew up right in front of me. It was crazy.
Now you share, I believe in the front of your book, or maybe it's the end of the book, you share a Taoist fable.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is? Or
Sure, and that's thank you for bringing that up, Jackie, because I think it's a great way of explaining stories. So it's about a farmer and his horse was one of his prized possessions. And one day the horse ran away, and his neighbors came over and they said, "I'm so sorry that your horse ran away." And he said, "Maybe." Then the next day, the horse came back with 12 wild horses for the farmer to train. And then the neighbors came back over and said, "Wow, how fortunate you are." And the farmer said, "Maybe." And then the next day, his son is training one of the wild horses, falls off and breaks his legs. And then the neighbors come back over and said, "How unfortunate." And the farmer says,
Maybe.
"Maybe," right. So then the next day, the army comes through the town to enlist all eligible men. And the farmer's son is spared because of his broken leg. And the neighbors come back over. Wow, these neighbors are really nosy. The neighbors come back over and say, "How fortunate." And he says, "Maybe." So the farmer doesn't label events in life as either good or bad. And because he doesn't, he's able to weather life much more easily. But also, when something happens in that moment, we only have that perspective. But if we can take that 1,000-foot view, like in that story, we could see how all of the events of our lives weave together to tell a much richer story. And there are so many people that I've talked to that have been through very difficult times. And when you ask them, "Would you go through it again?" Oftentimes they say yes, because out of that adversity, they have become stronger.
Yeah, totally. It's a true deal. Oh my goodness, ladies, we have about 5 minutes left. Judi, have you had fun so far?
I've had fun. You guys are so cool.
So I do want to give you the
we're cool.
We're cool.
I was going to say groovy, but that's
cool.
Todd's term.
I do want to give you the opportunity to tell us about some gifts that you have on your website, and that is Judi with an I, Miller.net. What's there, Judi?
Sure. So as part of my launch, 5 of my top transformational teachers, which I love, are giving away.
Marcy, I know. I got to get Marcy back on the show. There's a groovy lady right there.
Yes, Marcy's very groovy. So she's giving away a free ebook as part of my launch. So once you buy the book, just go to my website and you can get 5 of these. She's giving away a free ebook on happiness. Deborah Poneman, the founder of Yes to Success, is giving away a book on success. Dr. Sue Morter, who wrote the Energy Codes, is giving away a meditation on how to get back into our bodies. And she's also giving away one of her short videos. And then Janet Bray Atwood, who wrote the Passion Test, the #1 test for finding our passions in life, is giving away 21 meditations on love and her free ebook.
Is that the same Janet Atwood that's a speaker coach?
Janet Atwood, well, she does speak, she does teach.
Anyway.
So those are 5.
It is. I think that's her. I'll have to go check.
So I invite you to pick up a copy of Perfect, and if you do, definitely take advantage of those 5 free bonuses.
Awesome. And do they buy that from your website then? It's right there for people to purchase?
So I invite people to go to my website. It actually takes them to Amazon, but while they're on the website, they can see. They could buy from any other reputable, retailer, but then they have to go back to judimiller.net and put in their information to get the bonuses.
Gotcha.
So that comes along with the purchase of the book.
Yes, but I know people like free things. I love free things. So when you're on my website, there's a tab called Free Ebook, and that's my gift to your listeners. It's called Awaken the Creator Within. So they can take that and get that totally for free.
What do you think of that book, Jackie? I know Jackie got it and read it.
No, I loved it. It's got, I think, 8 pretty easy exercises in it that you can start putting into application right away and work through. I think there's a couple of them mention a 30-day period where you get do these exercises and making it a habit. But Judi, I loved it. I thought it was really helpful, and I saved it on my desktop so I can just click back into it every day and make sure I'm keeping on the program. So thank you so much for that. I highly recommend it.
One of the exercises is sing and let your spirit find its voice. And I look forward to hearing Jackie sing.
You might do so, but the audience probably doesn't.
Me too. I want to hear. Very cool. So are we missing anything, Judi? And I hope that you will come back on the show. I think there's a lot more that we could talk about. And I think there's a lot more that we could visit and exchange stories. Don't you love exchanging stories with people?
Absolutely. So, we focused on the practical things, but there's some messages that came out as part of the experience. So in the future, I'd love to be able to share them with you as well.
Should we have her back on, Jackie? What do you think?
Of course. Of course.
I knew she'd say that. Any takeaways, Jackie? Did you get any takeaways from today's show?
Oh, you know what? I'm just very interested and intrigued with the afterlife, or the, not the afterlife, the other life, or the past life experiences, and that your parents, or maybe it's just specifically your mother, her emotional state, her story can really be part of your story, and that my story also is now part of my children's story. It's pretty interesting. And yet, you know, we're all linked. Generations are all linked, not just through DNA and physical genealogy or adoption records or whatnot, but we've got this physiological and scientific chain, you know, of
memories,
relationship. And it's actually pretty cool when you think about it, how many layers there are to this relationship word that we use all the time. But it's not just DNA, it's emotional, it's experience, it's story. Right, Judi?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. That's what fascinates me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to have her back. I know, Judi, you mentioned something, and I was taught, because I am an alcoholic with 18 years now, something like that, that an alcoholic can affect 8 generations with their emotions, attitudes, and behaviors. And I think you reflected on that with the statement that you made about a person affecting 8 generations with their story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
That's about all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I would really like for you to check out Judi's book. It's a really cool book. Check out her website. Get all that free stuff. Go to lifemasteryradio.net and check out my book. My book's really cool too.
Hey, don't forget my book.
Oh, and then there's Jackie's.
Oh, wow.
You know, I've said it so many times in the past, and you don't have the book. But today she has the book. So
I have the book.
we're gonna start a new thing. You're gonna have that book all the time now. And just check us out. Lastly, I would like for you to think about this. Please make it a great day, because it is all about choice. Bye-bye for now.
Bye. Thanks, Judi.
Oh, and Bernie Siegel's next week, right, Jackie?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Bernie Siegel next week, right here on Life Mastery Radio. Tune in.
Yep. That's a man who changed my story. Definitely. Bye.